And there we go. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. This is the very first of our FCI Live series. This was developed actually from your response to our co-video series last year. People missed it. The dynamicism of getting to be in a live space together, sharing ideas, hearing from experts. So we went and found out if people were willing to do it again. And indeed, a whole bunch of experts and peers were. So we have 3 weeks of terrific content planned for you that we're very excited about. If you're not getting the weekly emails letting you know which sessions are happening this week, what's in the future, where to register, you will be now, because if you signed up for this, you will automatically get put in that email list. Of course, we're also featuring all of the events on Facebook. They all have a Facebook event page that leads you to the registration page, and you can check them out there. Tonight, we have with us Don Moffit of Columinate, Understanding Project Management. I'm just going to take care of a few housekeeping bits before I turn everything over to Don and his terrific presentation for the evening. I have to get the slides doing what I'm telling you to do. Okay, quick housekeeping. Video if you can during the chat parts, or like when you're interacting and talking with folks. It does help us to connect. We do understand not everybody can be on video. Don't worry about it if you can't, or you have something reason you don't want to. Mute if you're not speaking. It prevents sound quality issues. Thank you so much. We are recording this, so keep that in mind when speaking. This will eventually be put on our YouTube page and be up for a while, probably years, so just keep that in mind. For check-in, as I said, please post the name of your co-op and its location in the chat box. For participating, just keep in mind today's call is focused and brief. We have 1 hour and we will stick to it. So please respect the facilitator's efforts to keep us on topic. And because of the nature of how many people we're expecting tonight, which was 50 or more, please use the chat quite extensively. So what's going to happen is, as Don's presenting, we'll encourage you to put your questions in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat. Feel free to also, sometimes a little conversations will happen over there saying, oh yeah, we did that, and this is the company we used. Feel free to use the chat in a very active way. As there are opportunities, as Don pauses between slides, I will take your questions to him if there's time and opportunity, and then we hope for an open Q&A at the end. Either way, if we don't get to all your questions, we will wrap up at the top of the hour, but Don has generously offered to stay after that point once I hit the end of the recording, and you can continue to ask more questions if you have time to stay a little longer, which is very kind of him. All right, I am going to stop sharing my screen, and Don's going to get his slides ready. So we asked Don if he would come and present as part of this series, and we kind of left it open to him, what he felt startups most needed, what he was running into. And this was the top topic, the thing that really came to mind, and he must have been right, because you guys have signed up for this one faster and in higher numbers than any of the other sessions so far. And we're very, very grateful to him for coming tonight and sharing this. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Don. Thanks.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Hey, Jacqueline, there's going to be a survey after, right?
That wasn't planned, but
okay.
You gave me an interesting idea. We'll see what I can fit into my work schedule.
The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go back here for a moment. I want to post the question I have for people when this is all over was this useful? I hope it will be, but I want to find out. I'm putting my email address in the chat box, and I'll try to remember to do that again at the end. So if you don't know anything about me at all, you probably don't associate me with project management, because my focus is financial feasibility and pro formas. But just to fill you in, I have a degree in architecture. I did a lot of project management for Whole Foods Market in the first years of the company. And I was the project manager for Durham Co-op for 5 years. So I am a member. Okay, make this thing happen. Wait a minute. Here we go. I am a member of Columinate. Most of you know we're focused on providing an entire range of services, primarily to cooperatively owned grocery stores, a lot of startups, and they range from startup services like market studies and pro formas and project management to ongoing operations and board development. Now, in my work, with financial feasibility, I spend a lot of time with board members talking about the project. And it's pretty common for people to bring up project management and even ask, what are all the tasks that need to get done? Let's see here. Got to get this so I don't have to switch too much. Okay. I'm going to slide. Jacqueline, if I do something that messes things up, you'll tell me, right? Okay.
I will let you know, but it looks good.
Okay, so tonight the things I want to talk about include, like what does it mean to talk about a project manager, and to talk about it during different stages of the co-op. Who needs to do it? What needs to get done? What's the right order? But first, I'm going to talk about some terms and concepts so we're all using the same language. So bear with me because I want to go through this first part pretty quickly. In one way, it's easy to categorize the project, right? What's the project? It's developing a cooperatively owned grocery store. But embedded in that are multiple projects. At the next level, there's 3. In stage 1, you're creating your organization, the legal structure, the norms on how the board operates, and you're building support within the community, which is demonstrated most clearly, of course, by growth in your membership. In stage 2, and even in stage 3, you're focusing on the facilities, right? You're moving your focus, expanding it to include the facilities. First, you're doing feasibility work to make sure that your vision works. And that's all different kinds of projects. And then you're in the next stage, the second half, late stage of stage 2, to B, you're planning intently for the store to be. And of course, in stage 3, you're implementing and expanding your focus to include staff, the systems, the product, all the things that go into the operations of a store. As you can imagine, you can break it down even further. All right, here we go. So that's the first part. Oh, I'm sorry. So right now we're going to talk about who's the project manager. So the answer, if you think about it, if you think about those 3 stages, you might be able to answer these questions. When do you start? Who's the project manager? And the answer is, it depends, because it depends on which part of the overall project we're talking about, right? There's going to be a lot of different people that are doing project management. And the answer for the first one, when do you start it, is when you all started the first time and said, okay, great idea, let's start a co-op. What's the first thing on our list? Project management began at that point. So this is the way the Durham Co-op thought about it near the end of stage 2. At that point, we imagined there were 6 silos here, and we identified key people involved in each. And by doing this, we could keep track of who was accountable, what were they doing, what was the silo, if you will, and what were the tasks that was involved. But, I'll talk a little bit more about lists in a minute, but this doesn't really capture everything you need to think about. So we want to talk about the planning process. We're going to talk about tasks and milestones and precedents and dependence. In this case, so I'm using, like I told you, I'm going to go pretty fast with this, and I can slow down if people need me to. But first of all, I'm going to use the word task to talk about broad categories of the project. Think of each one of them as a path that's leading to the successful co-op and the successful co-op in the open store. So some of the ones that I think about along that way is organizing the co-op, thinking about like finding the site, finance, construction, staff, product, merchandising. These are all, to me, are some of the tasks involved in opening the co-op. Now, milestones are the landmarks along the way. The way that we, let's see, there we go. I've been juggling too many things, and I got to I think I can do it now. So the milestones are trackable steps, right? The milestones are the landmarks on the path. The task is the path. The milestones mark our progress. We know when we can look forward to the next step. So you could say that the task is complete when all the milestones in that task are accomplished. The level of detail that you can use can vary. For me, it works best when I focus on the major milestones. Sometimes I throw in steps that absolutely must not be overlooked. So you can see that there's a level here that I'm trying not to go too broad and not trying to be too detailed. So finance, you're going to research the assumptions about what do you need in the way of money. You're going to look for grants, trying to find out what you have. You're going to be, applying for grants, tax credits, whatever you find to use. Pro forma. So you can see here's the different steps that are in finance. Now we're going to see how this all ties together in a few minutes. So how do we keep track of it? Okay, now lists, right? So one way is the spreadsheet I showed you from Durham Co-op. Then there's, whiteboards, right? This is from a day on the Durham Co-op. We had a whole wall that was a whiteboard, and we filled it up with all these lists. You can do it on a legal pad. You can go interactive. Trello is a list app, for example. Lila over at the Durham Co-op uses it a lot within the store. But lists don't tell the whole story. What's missing is really important. When you look at the whole expanse of tasks and milestones, you'll see that we need to track a little more information. And even what I'm going to show you in a few minutes doesn't really do everything that I would want it to do if I was doing project management. So first of all, I want to know resources that is required for each step. That's the time and the money. And in particular, I'm focused on time. Who's doing it and how much time do they have? There's the amount of time it takes to accomplish a milestone. That's the duration of the step, right? So I'm going to think about, I want to know, how long does it take to do this step? I'm going to, let me back up for a moment. So think about it, right? Bidding a project out is going to take 3 or 4 weeks. And the impacts, when everything else needs to get done, everything else has to accommodate that period of time. So what's the duration? But more than that, I need to know what comes before bidding. What are the precedents? What leads to bidding? And what are the things that are dependent on bidding? They can't start until the bidding is done. So when I know all of those things, and I know how all those connections work, I can then begin to look at what should we be focusing on right now and what's coming up next. So here's a little sample. The good software programs will let you track all of these. My focus tends to be on those timeline things, precedents, durations, and dependence. So here's a single milestone from the Durham Co-op development. This is site design, and the dates indicate I gave it a duration of 5 weeks. So there was a 5-week gap in here, or 5 weeks from the start to the end. So here's a little more context. This is precedents that are required before starting site design, right? This is coming off of the design portion here. This is coming off of finance. But a little more context begins to show some of the dependents, right? You can't get a site plan approval from the city if you don't have a site design. You can't do the site work. You'll notice there's another precedent for site work, which is the remediation on the property. And you'll notice that building construction can't happen until the site work is done, nor can it happen until you've got construction proposals, bids, if you will. So here it is, site design within the context of this whole project. Don't spend any time trying to see all these. I'm going to show you this kind of stuff in detail in just a moment. But there's one more thing here that is really important to me, which is that when you figure out what the duration of all the steps are and you figure out the dependence and the precedents, then you can see something else. A good program is going to show you this red line. That red line is the critical path. The steps on that path at the time I did this chart are the ones that determine the first day the store can open. So I know that I need to focus attention. I need to make sure that each one of these steps is moving in the time that I expect it to, and that I can focus on these other issues when I know these things are going smoothly. This chart, by the way, is called a PERT chart. So here's another PERT chart. This one is generated by an open source project management program called Project Libre. It's right here, Project Libre. So it's downloadable. You can go in there and type in, like here it says pro forma update, has a duration, the start date and the end date. You can put those in or they're generated automatically depending on precedence and dependence, actually on precedence. And you can see that here's the critical path in this particular project, right? This is just a little snippet of it. There's another kind of chart that's very popular called the Gantt chart. This is actually the exact same file that we were just looking at. It's just a different kind of chart. And the red line, as you can imagine, is the critical path. Okay, so I'm going to take a deep breath for a moment and just make sure, Jacqueline, if you have any questions.
Don't have questions in the chat so far.
Okay.
I think people are kind of getting their feet as to where you're at. So I would say encourage people as he moves forward here to start throwing questions in the chat for our next pause.
Right. If you have them, line them up. But the main thing that I wanted to do right now is to make sure that we all, when I say task or a milestone, we have an idea what I'm talking about, or precedence, dependence, and duration, the critical path. And I wanted to just show you the Gantt charts and the PERT charts. My brain works best with the PERT charts, but man, those Gantt charts, that's a real common construction scheduling kind of, yeah, you'll walk into a construction office and they'll have a chart running down the wall because it, they'll line up like 15 pages of paper with bars running down it so they can keep track of what they're doing. What I want to do now is I want to look at it by stage. So, and of course, you're familiar with this. This is the 4 cornerstones, the 3 stages of co-op development. And we're going to look at it by stage. So stage 1, this is the organizing. So here's a task, right? Organizing. And the steps on the path is creating a vision and mission. Then this is mine, right? You guys would be thinking, oh no, wait a minute, you left out a step. That's good. Yours would have another step. I happen to line these up sequentially. I said that before you can really go out after members, you need to have bylaws. And before you can do bylaws, you've got to incorporate. And before you do that, you should have a vision and mission. But someone else might say, no, 2 of these things can happen at the same time. But this is stage 1. And each step, well, that, like vision and mission, you may not have a project manager, but somebody's going to the Secretary of State and filing incorporation papers. They're the project manager. And one of the things when we talk about who's the project manager, like a lot of times it's going to be somebody in your core volunteer group. And if you're clear about who it is and you're clear about what they should be doing, then you have accountability. Then you can say, how are things going? They're working with a group, they're working with a committee. And okay, anyways. So now I'm going to move to, there we go, 2A. So this is early stage 2. This is feasibility, right? So the great thing about if you follow this model is by the time you start getting members in, you've got funds in the bank to begin to pay for your feasibility work. And feasibility, you've got 4 things you can do all at the same time, right? So these are all not independent of each other, but they are all happening simultaneously. Now, by the time you get to 2B, right, now you're in the planning stage and things are starting to multiply. You're getting more tasks, right? So once you cross over, you get 4 green lights in feasibility, and you get this whole planning thing going. At that point, you're now starting to look at more tasks. You've got a time, one of your big tasks is raising money, and somebody needs to manage that. In fact, you might even break that into 2 parts, right? You might say there's institutional financing, and there is, or you might break it into 3. You might say grants, institutional lending, and our member capital campaign. And they may be different committees, different groups, different project managers. You start building your own model of how this is all going to work. At the same time, you're working on site. You've got a site committee working. It may be a purchase. This one focuses on leasing. And really, one of the things that helps with leasing is if you can come in with a business plan, where you can come in and say, this is like the business we're planning to run, and this is why we want to lease space here. So I've got a precedent for leasing to be the business plan here. And I'm also saying that before you really get deep into you're going to look at sites, you're going to do test fits to see how things work. And there you're going to start, and that's going to feed into leasing as well. And then really, as you get deeper into planning, you're going to be starting to think about equipment, particularly refrigeration, staffing. Now, I'm hoping that the project managers for finance and the site and the staff are all part of your core group. But this is a time when you probably will start thinking about a facilities project manager, someone with expertise, someone that you will pay to help you with all of this, who can help shepherd the process for the design, the construction, the equipment. Now, by the first part of implementation, which is stage 3A, you should have your site secured with conditions, right? So that if it doesn't work out, you're not locked in, you haven't committed all the resources of the co-op. Now, this work is real, and all the pieces have to come together just right before you get to the right-hand side of this stage. So if you look at the vertical line there, that represents the go, no-go decision. And there's no turning back at that point. That's when you lock in the lease, you commit all the resources of co-op, and you're moving ahead. And in my plan, see, at this point, now you're in 3A, right? You're in implementation. You're not quite committed, but by now you're really got to be thinking not just like, hey, we need to get around to designing, but you've done a request for qualifications. You've picked an architect. They've generated the test fit said the site would work. You've got the site. You're now generating a fixture plan, which is helping to generate the equipment list. And that's feeding into the refrigeration request for proposals. So you can get a contract to get back up here into the design and engineering phase, which you've got to do. You can see how things have to line up. And you can imagine, I don't have a critical path on here, but you can imagine that critical path is going to go right through the refrigeration contract. It's going to take a while to get from a fixture plan to a contract where you've got, or at least far enough into a contract that a refrigeration company is willing to do the engineering for you. There's so much work in selecting the kinds of cases and thinking about the costs. And so all this has to line up. Meanwhile,
Don, can I break in with a quick question?
You may.
We had a terminology question. Can you talk about test fit? I don't think it's a term that a lot of startups have heard.
Right. Okay. So when I talk about a test fit, I'm talking about a co-op goes out, they find a space, and there's several questions that need to be answered before you conclude that first round of lease negotiations. Does it have visibility? Does it have access? Does it work financially? But one of them is, will this space actually work for a grocery store? And a test fit, if you go to a store designer, they can do a relatively quick, it should be relatively inexpensive, just a plan to say, yeah, this, based on the kind of program that you want to have for your co-op, this should work. This is, the test fit is the first step in a floor plan. Just making sure that that space is going to work right.
Great. Thank you. Sorry, you might have heard this referred to as preliminary store design.
You could do that. Yeah, that's right.
Sometimes it's referred to as that. So right. Same term.
So there's some of this stuff is happening, in the feasibility stage too, right? Because you are looking at the site and you're trying to make sure, I've kind of concluded feasibility when you get to planning, but this stuff flows through, right? You're really making sure that this works. You got another question?
I didn't. Nope. That was the main question, was around that phrase people hadn't heard before, and then wanting to make sure they understood it before you kept going.
Sure. That's and let me just say that I have been talking really fast because I haven't ever given this presentation before, and so I think we have plenty of time for questions if people want that. So this is 3A. Oh, and here's what you're going to do. You're going to add another major project manager in this stage, in my opinion, right? And in comes the general manager. So somewhere back in here, you're hiring a general manager, and they're going to have responsibilities, right? So they're going to be the person responsible for staff and product, but they're also going to have a major role in, what I don't even have on this chart is marketing. And they're going to also have a major role in equipment and overseeing construction, and some say in decor. So, and this solid line over here, I think I said it already, but that's the go, no go decision. All right.
Before we get any further, there was a question, seeing the test fit and the design process kind of separate from the equipment design and getting to refrigeration. Are those pieces usually separated, fixture planning from test fitting, preliminary designing the store? There's some confusion about seeing those pieces separate.
So again, this is just when I'm working on this and I'm thinking, what's the sequencing? So actually what I'd say is, to me, they're somewhat separate. The first question I want to answer, they don't have to be for you, but the first question I want to answer is, before I get deep into lease negotiations, will this space work for a retail store? Not what is it going to be, right? Not the final plan, but is it going to work? So that's really the feasibility part of that. Then, and that may be, if I'm early in the game on my request for qualifications for architects, this RFQ here, that's store design. If I'm early in the game, I've got them doing the test fit, and they're probably going to build on the test fit to get to a fixture plan. So you could argue that the RFQ should be further back in the process, the test fit, and it should be a precedent for the test fit. You could argue that the test fit is a precedent for the fixture plan, but you can see that it is in the sequence because it goes test fit, leasing, fixture plan. But this is just my model. The really important thing is, if I were to send this to anybody, use my email address, I'll be happy to send you a copy of it. But if you just use this, it won't be what you need it to be. The important thing is for you to find a program that you can build your own model, have your own critical path, and understand the steps in your process. But I wanted to give you an idea of what those steps might look like. So this is the rest of my plan. This is where all of the tasks, the paths that we were talking about, they all lead to opening day. And of course, by opening day, all of these milestones are complete, right? And there's a lot of steps that are not on here. For example, I don't want to overthink it, but between construction and opening day is a certificate of occupancy. In a lot of places, between construction and opening day, there's a certificate of occupancy before they're stocking, right? So a lot of this is all bound up in somewhere in there, like with Durham. I got rolling on Durham and then discovered that I had overlooked health department permits, and that somehow the inspections department hadn't realized everything that we were doing, and I had to stop the process and then get over to the health department to get permits to keep moving the project forward. You'll find sometimes things like that will happen. So one of the problems with this particular chart, this is in my mind, this is a decent, I just created this the other day for this workshop, but it gives you some idea of some of the connections. One of the problems with this particular chart is that it's static, right? There's no timelines, no durations. And so because of the lack of durations, the lack of a starting date, you can't adjust, and it doesn't show you the critical path. So I can tell you refrigeration is going to be on the critical path, but if I didn't tell you that, you wouldn't know exactly where that path might be. But I do like this because it's a little less structured. If you may not remember what I showed you with Project Libre, but it's much more linear, right? Boxes that are with arrows that are straight. And I happen to like the way this flows a little bit. Let's see. So I dropped in a couple other tasks that come later. Decor, for example, that comes off of design. And it goes into signage. And I put signage in here because it's a really, really big part of getting a store ready and open. And it's one that's easy to underestimate. If you think about deli signs, produce signs, shelf talkers, aisle signs, department signs, the signs on the outside of the building, your big commercial signs. There's a vast number of signs that have to be created and installed in one way or another. So that's in there. There's another step that I want to make sure that everybody's thinking doesn't seem that big. It's really big. And that's getting the POS database established and making sure that everything with the POS system is working rock solid before you open the store. So there's a selection of POS. Back here, you have an equipment list. You have to select the system. The store has to be engineered for it so that you have the right communications and the right electrical systems, connections, circuits. But then you've got to get everything installed, and you've got to get the database populated. Oh, when I said signs, what I left off with the little shelf tags. Every product on the shelf has a tag on it, and all those have to be installed. Another one is, so there's product, right? There's selecting a distributor. There's the planograms, figuring out what's going to be in the store, where it goes in the store, how much of it there's going to be, ordering it, right? And somewhere in here, you're getting data up to the database. And then it's coming in, and once you have your certificate of occupancy, you can start stocking the store to get it ready for opening day.
We have a question here that I think is good to talk about now. When I go back up to, we had a couple. Can you talk about the overlap or lack thereof in duties, typically with the project manager and the GM? And I know you have a lot of experience with this one.
Right. So my favorite answer to almost any question is it depends. And in this case, it depends on the relative qualifications of the general manager and the project manager. Okay. I think it's really important to make it clear from the outset what the reporting responsibilities are going to be. So when you hire a project manager, if you're back over here, right, in stage 3A, and you hire a project manager to come in here and do to help you with site design, equipment, you should make it very clear to them that, because they're going to be reporting to the board, right? They're going to be coming to board meetings. They're going to be telling you like how things are going, what the progress is, what the budget is, and then you're going to hire a general manager. And ultimately, you're going to expect the general manager to be completely responsible for everything that happens once the store opens. So the general manager is going to want to have a lot of say in all the things that you hired the project manager to do. And I think you need to make it clear from the outset with the project manager that you expect them to be, everybody to be adults and to work together well, and that the exact reporting structure is that in all likelihood, they're going to report directly to the general manager. I'm not exactly sure how to say that, because you may want to reserve. My argument has been they should report to the general manager, period. But I've gotten a little pushback from people that says sometimes we don't have a general manager that we want to entrust with all of that decision making. You have to be careful not to overly, as a board, not to overly control the process once you hire the general manager. So you just have to be really careful about those reporting relationships. My tendency, if people ask me today, who should report to who and how, I would say the board hires the project manager. The project manager reports to the board until the general manager is hired. Then the project manager reports to the general manager, who reports to the board. You may have to, as a board, make sure that everybody's playing nice in the sandbox. That's okay. It's just managing the personalities of the people involved. But that's the way that I would do it.
We have an additional question. So there's some question about just if you were going to bring in a project manager, should the project manager have specific expertise in project management? Is it more important that, you know, they have the ability to run projects, work well with the team, so forth? And they're talking about, I think sometimes there's a little confusion going on the questions about the kind of project manager you're discussing is specifically, and see if I'm right about this, facility project management rather than the overall project management, or maybe some clarification there.
Right. So what was the first part of that again, Jacqueline?
Well, should the project manager actually have expertise specifically in doing this kind of project management, or can someone else, you know, with skills but not that experience fill the role?
Right. Okay. So let me. I want to try to tackle the second question first, which is, when I was saying project manager a moment ago, when I was saying the board hires a project manager who's going to report to the board until the general manager is hired, I was thinking specifically of a facilities project manager, somebody who's going to oversee on behalf of the board things like putting out a request for qualifications for the design firm, putting together a request for proposal for refrigeration equipment, working with the architect on the bidding process for construction. So that's what I was addressing. So that there are co-ops who have looked for people to hire people to manage the project in earlier stages. And the opportunity there is that you can get somebody who's totally focused on growing the co-op, growing the membership, on managing the, when you're in the feasibility stage, when you're over here in stage 2A and you're doing a pro forma, you know, somebody has to put out a request for proposals, talk to someone like me who does that kind of feasibility work, get the proposal, take it to the board, and you could hire somebody to do that work. The risk is when you have a board who feels like if they've authorized someone else to do it, they've done their job. The thing that made the Durham Co-op, I will say I was really, really proud to be associated with the Durham Co-op for a couple of reasons. But the main reason was that the board was entirely engaged throughout the entire process. So they never looked to me or anyone else to say, well, this is your job, not mine. So in all of the work that I helped them with, and I helped them through in all these stages, really, almost as a volunteer, but not quite. And they were the ones who did, like if we had an event, they were the ones who went there and did the work, who sold the tickets, collected the tickets, and led the tours, and provided the refreshments. If they had a booth at the farmers market, Saturday after Saturday after Saturday, board members were out there at the farmers market. And I think that was really critical for people because they were walking the talk. And so I think I think that was really critical in terms of growing the co-op in the early stages. So the question about when I think about a project manager, who am I thinking about? I'm thinking about the ones with the expertise that people on the board may not have. Site, design, particularly design and equipment and construction facilities.
Okay.
Sorry, I got going way too long on that.
That was good. I think the one clarification there. I think that leads to a different question here, and that's what I was trying to pull apart. So Don's talking specifically about facilities project management, which is a very, in this case where he's pointing to here, and that's a very specific skill set. There was a question about, can the project manager ever be a board member? And we have seen successful project management up to that point staying with a board member who has project management experience. So I would say it's not unseen. What have you seen, Don?
No, I agree. Unfortunately, I mean, what I have seen, no, I don't. I actually have a colleague who does project management, and I've never seen a proposal from her, so I can't speak to that at all. Winston. Sorry, Winston, if you're out there, I just dropped your last name Winston, and I apologize. Estes. Thank you. Winston Estes. I always just think Winston. When I was running a region for Whole Foods Market, I had a guy come to me and say, I do this kind of work. And we were getting ready to do a new store. And I hired him, and he did great work. And he went on to do that for Whole Foods Market as a whole. And not too long ago, I approached him about, like, was he a resource that I could refer people to? And the cost of his firm doing it now would be $100,000. So that is a big chunk of change. So a lot of co-ops, if they can't if they have the expertise within their group, then they will probably have somebody as a volunteer do the management.
Which leads to the next really complex question. I think you're going to say it depends again. Somebody asked, Shirley from South Coast said, with COVID, in the situation right now, is it wise for co-ops to be spending the kind of money on project management during the current times? I think there's a lot of it depends, but I'll turn that over to you.
Yes. So one of the interesting things about the pandemic to me that's totally surprised me is that so far we haven't seen a recession. And although I do think that the recession is all about, market valuations, and I think the market is highly overvalued, and I don't think we're too far from a recession. But we haven't seen construction slow down. We have not seen in any industry where people are like pulling back. In retail, we have seen a lot of retailers, smaller retailers in particular, but I've seen that, like, there's a Bed Bath & Beyond not far from us that closed not long ago. And so there's more and more opportunities for the co-ops that are positioned to take advantage of those opportunities. The answer to when should we hire a project manager is when you feel like you are getting lined up on things like finance, right? We've got the prospectus done, we've got the business plan done, we have now got a lease with conditions on it. Oh, we're now getting ready for the capital campaign. We're talking to lenders and grants, and now we're ready to really start digging into the things like design and equipment, getting ready for construction, and we need the expertise. I don't think it's related to COVID. It's related to the readiness of the co-op to take that next step forward.
I would agree. I was say, and I'm going to make the plug because Don kind of can't. I was about to put it in the comments, but the right project manager will save you money. So if you have outstripped the board's expertise and or capacity, you need a project manager to keep moving forward. If you can find someone who has the actual skills to do that. And in the last stage, he's talking about facilities. This is where if you can find somebody who really has the knowledge to do it, they can save you a ton of money. And Don, can you speak to that for a minute and why that might be?
Well, yes, I can actually. So there's a number of ways. First of all, they can keep a project moving so that it happens on a timely basis. And if you're paying interest on loans, that matters. It also matters if you're, as you start building up more and more of the pre-opening costs, when you hire a general manager, the time between the hiring and the time that you open, there's a cost attached to that, to the department managers. So keeping the project moving. The second is in knowing how to approach architecture firms, how to do a request for qualifications, how to negotiate a design contract, how to make sure that the engineering is complete so that when the contractor gets the drawings, the bid that they give you, there's not a lot of changes afterwards. Those change orders can be very expensive. Somebody working that has any experience at all working with refrigeration companies when we did the Durham co-op market, if I remember right, refrigeration was around $420,000 by itself, right? It was a major percentage of the total project cost. So somebody who's familiar with refrigeration and comfortable with that can help. On Durham, as a project manager, I manage all these processes. And when we got the bid back for the construction, at that point, I just said, no, we're not going to build this project. It's not going to happen. And so we sat down, the contractor and me and the architects, and the contractors put their line by line costing down in front of me with the drawings, and we went through it line by line. I would point to something, they would unroll the drawings, and they'd say, that's floor to tile ceramic, that's floor to ceiling ceramic tile in the bathrooms. It's going to look beautiful. Take it out. And we did that throughout the entire project and cut tens of thousands of dollars out of it. But that's because I had the background and the experience to do it. So there are a lot of different ways that a project manager can provide more value to the project than they cost.
Don, I just want to point out we have about 4 to 5 minutes left before we'll do some wrap up, and then people can stay and talk more if they want. Was there more you wanted to get through, or should I keep plugging through questions?
Actually, keep plugging through questions. Okay. This is actually the oh right. I have a final. That's my ending slide. I'll show it to you, and then I'll go back to this chart. So go right ahead.
Okay, so can you talk, well, the final questions was, can you talk about deciding programming and where that comes into play in the project? It seems like a piece that keeps slipping through for some of our projects, and it was brought up by Kevin as well. Where would that fit in this?
Right. So, yes. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with the term program, that typically is part of the store design process, right? So what you do when you create the program is you basically sketch out in text, in writing, what it is that you want in the store. So you would say it's going to have produce. It's going to have, what's the meat department look like, right? Does it have a service meat? Does it have self-serve? Is there a cutting room? Is it all come in retail ready? And so all of that winds up going into the program that the co-op creates. A project manager can help with it. The architecture firm can help with it because they're going to actually need to know what you're expecting when they design the store. So if you go to someone, there are firms like Seven Roots, Retail Planet, and others who have a lot of experience with doing retail store plans. They need less guidance, not as much programming. But there are still areas where they're going to need help. What are you going to do in your prepared foods? That's where Kevin comes in. And people like Mark Mulcahy at Columinate's another one who can help the co-op say, this is how we want to approach prepared foods. It's going to be all grab and go, all prepared. No, it's going to have a service case where we'll do service deli. There'll be hot foods. We'll do breakfast. We'll have seating. I don't know what the answers are. That all goes into the program. And typically, see, that's great. If Kevin had been looking over my shoulder, probably somewhere right in here, I'd be doing the program. So when we did Durham Co-op Market, I never wrote that program out. We worked with Nicole Klamick to originate the early floor plans, and then I worked with the local architects to refine them. And another question will be that you'll think about with the program, just as the relationship of areas, right? Oh, we want produce, we want meat, and we want dairy. It's helpful to the architect to know if you want to flow from produce back to deli over to meat, how does all that work, right? Where's dairy in the flow? Just to give them an idea, you might just say, these are the perimeter departments. Traffic should flow through them in some kind of, reasonable order. And the center of the store typically would be for the shelf-stable items, frozen. When you're doing a project like this, there's one more thing I'll mention, thinking about general managers. When the general manager comes on board, some things you will not be able to change inexpensively. And so the general manager may be left to have to deal with things the way they've already been planned, even if they disagree with that. And that's just the way it is. The second general manager that the co-op hires is not going to be able to rearrange the departments, even if they think it would be a good idea, because the store will be open, it'll be functioning, and it won't be possible. So, but other things, the general manager may be able to come in early enough to actually have some input into the way things happen. When Lila was hired at Durham Co-op Market, she was like, you got the frozen in the wrong place, Don. We've got to move the frozen across the store. And we were able to do that. It's like, okay, what's it going to take to do that? We don't have to slab down yet. We can, it's a matter of redoing the plumbing. And, it didn't cost a whole lot. There were other things that Lila was like, okay, I can see what I would like to do, but not anymore because I'm not going to, it's not, the cost is too high.
Don, to check in, do you have any wrap-up thoughts you want to share with folks? We have about 2 minutes.
No, I mean, mainly I just want to say that there's a lot of different stages. There's so many things going on, so many moving parts that when you do your chart like this, when you begin to understand what the precedents are, what the dependents are for each step, when you begin to think what are the durations? How long will it take to turn out a fixture plan? to get to a lease. And then if you have it in a dynamic program where you say the lease is going to take 3 weeks, and you come back and you say, good news, I did it in 2. It'll change your critical path for you, and or it's going to take 5 weeks, and then you can keep up day by day. What's happening? Where do we need to be focusing our attention? And if you can imagine that this chart you're looking at is just really a glimpse at the complexities of this really wonderful project that you've taken on, you can see how important it is to keep up with it step by step. So I hope that this has been useful and helpful. I've enjoyed putting this together for you, and I think you just unshared me, right?
I did. I got a couple closing slides I want to share there about what's coming next.
That's great. I didn't know you could do that. I was like, wait a minute. And so, if there is no survey, then do send me an email and tell me how you do think that we can, that in the future I can make this more useful, whether I'm doing it for a particular client or if FCI wants me to come back and do it again sometime.
We will make it happen. I already put together the questions. I'll send out the survey tomorrow. So first, I just want to thank Don. Thank him so much for coming out and sharing his time with us and his expertise. I have a lot of questions. I do want you to know that all FCI live sessions are being recorded and will become available on our YouTube channel at the end of the entire FCI live series in the first week of March. So those are coming. Next topics tomorrow is the SBA loan guarantee. At noon Central with the team from National Cooperative Bank, who actually made it possible to get the SBA loan guarantee and have gotten the first SBA loan guarantee in the nation for a startup food co-op. If you are working on funding your co-op, you're going to want to be at that one. And then Thursday, we have the Gem City Market organizing team with Thinking Beyond. And it's really going to be about how did they organize the co-op with the community instead of for the community. And then Don will be back on Tuesday to talk about pro forma nuts and bolts. If you're new to pro formas, if you're not, but you have newer board members who are, board members who haven't been working on the pro forma who could learn to know more about it. But even those of you who've been working on the pro forma directly with Don are going to get some real value out of this one. Just want to take a quick second and thank those organizations that are making this series possible: the USDA, the National Cooperative Bank, National Cooperative Grocers, and CoBank. And with that, I'd just like to give a round of applause to Don and thank him for being here with us. And and we will stop recording. And if those of you want to stay and have more questions, you can actually unmute and talk with Don. Thanks so much for coming out and being part of the series, everyone. All right.
So let's